All right, it's time to get started. My name is David Davis of Actual Tech Media, and I'm excited to kick off today's special webinar discussion. The topic is, has remote work become an organizational priority? VDI is the answer that you're looking for. On today's event, we're excited to be joined by Scale Computing and Leostream, who helped to sponsor this event. So thank you to our sponsors. And I'm about to introduce you to our expert presenters here in just a moment. But before I do, I want to first point out that we want this to be an educational event. We want you to get all your questions answered. You'll find the questions tab is just to the right of the handouts tab on the left-hand side of your audience console. In fact, I can make that move around a little bit to call your attention to it over there. So if you have questions about the topic today, if you have challenges about VDI, we want to help you to solve those challenges. We have veterans in the industry and real administrators who are excited to answer those questions. So bring your greatest VDI challenges. We also have a number of handouts there in the handouts tab, links to Leostream, Scale Computing, and the Leostream Solutions Brief. Those are all available for download, or if you click on the links, it'll take you to the respective website. And then finally, at the end of today's event, we'll be announcing the winner of our Amazon $300 gift card prize. If you're watching this on demand, I'm sorry, the drawing has already occurred. The prize terms and conditions can be found there in the handouts tab as well. And with that, I'm excited to introduce our first two panelists. They are Mr. Alan Conboy, Office of the CTO at Scale Computing, and Ms. Karen Gondoli, CEO and Vice President of Product Management at Leostream. Alan and Karen, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having us, David.
Excellent. And then I'm also excited to be joined by Mr. Eric Hang and Mr. Ernest Wallace, computer techs at Horizon Health. Eric and Ernest, thank you for being on the event today.
Hey, thanks, David. Yeah, thanks for having us.
Excellent. All right. Well, so before we get started, just a little bit of stage setting. I mean, with more and more of us, all of us really, working remotely these days, we need VDI now more than ever before. We've been saying for many years, it's now going to be the year of VDI. Well, I think that year has finally come. It really is the year of VDI. But traditionally, VDI solutions have been very complex to implement, requiring tons of software, consultants, dedicated high-performance storage arrays. They've also been very expensive to implement in many cases, and also very monolithic. I mean, it's a large solution you have to bring in with experts on the topic, and it can be troublesome to administer in many cases. But not anymore, is what I'm hearing. I'm excited that we have Scale and Leostream together on today's event, along with real customers who have implemented this solution, to talk about it, share their experiences, and tell us what it's really like to use this solution on a daily basis. So with that, let's kick it off with our first question, and that is, what are the common VDI challenges, and how do your solutions overcome them? Why don't we start with you, Alan?
All right, thanks, David. So what are the common VDI challenges? VDI is kind of a three-legged stool, is the way that I like to describe it. Infrastructure, the virtual infrastructure that the workloads themselves will be running on, the desktops, the end user stuff. The connection broker that also needs to handle lifecycle management, integration with the virtual infrastructure. And then the third leg is profile management. Third leg, kind of optional depending on use case. Speaking to the first of those challenges, the virtual infrastructure, the complexities of legacy virtual approaches and infrastructure to run the VDI infrastructure on, that's something that we here at Scale have handled in spades for a very long time. We've always been about making virtual infrastructure easy to consume, easy to manage, highly fault tolerant, but done for the real world rather than just a select few. That's part of the solution right out of the gate, making the infrastructure that it all runs on something you don't even really have to think about. I'll let Karen speak to the VDI challenges as they relate to brokers and infrastructure on the rest of the stack.
Sure. Thanks, Alan. So Leostream's part in this puzzle is to provide the connection management tool and the remote access gateway. And our tenant in Leostream, our goals have always been to make it easy to deploy. You know, we deploy on Windows, so that helps you get over some of the extra costs that might be involved in other platforms because we don't require a Windows Server license just to install the management layer that you're using for your VDI solution. And then the whole idea with Leostream is it gives you this single pane of glass for managing everything that you need your users to get access to, whether that be on-prem, maybe you need a DR burst out into the cloud, and then also connect your users using whatever protocol works best for them. So we do provide a built-in HTML5 viewer, so that gets people up and running very, very quickly without having to install clients or anything like that. But we also integrate with a number of different higher performance protocols. So the challenge of performance that can typically come up in VDI, you have different ways of solving that by kind of picking and choosing the best protocol that works for the use case that your user has. We don't provide the profile management, that third layer that Alan's talking about, but because of the way both Scale and Leostream are architected, you can choose the profile management platform that works best for you, and it'll integrate seamlessly. So FS Logic, Liquidware, you have these different options for kind of building that third piece of the stool if you need it.
Absolutely. I would say, Karen, that it really is about giving end users a toolbox rather than just a hammer. The ability to easily and seamlessly roll out very, very quickly an entire VDI solution, but not have it have to take days, weeks, months to accomplish.
Right.
We've actually had folks implement our joint solution in no time flat.
Yeah, the folks, I was going to say, kudos to the folks at Scale who have made the implementation even easier, because they've kind of bundled our broker and I believe the gateway as well into images that are very easy to deploy. You know, for our normal installation, it's not hard. You deploy CentOS and then a single curl command you can install, but they've made it even easier by bundling these images in that you can install on their platform.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I've had folks actually happily implement on their HC3 clusters with the Leostream broker and gateway and restore access to remote workers that had just gotten trapped in home in less than an hour.
Very nice. Very nice. We've got our first two questions that came in here, and I think these are appropriate for the topic, and that is VDI on Scale. Is it new? Alan?
I would say that something that's pushing into 2 and change years old isn't exactly falling into the new category anymore. I would also say that with the many customers running the solution that have replaced their CITRIX-based solutions, replaced their Horizon-based solutions, and done so very happily, kind of points out that this isn't brand new anymore. What it is tested, used daily, all over the place.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay. Well, let's move on to the next question here, and that is basically where to run this. Should we do this in the cloud or on premises? I know a number of companies are asking the same question. Karen, do you want to take that first?
Yeah, I can chat a little bit about this. And I think to some extent, a lot of what's going to drive the choice of where you want to host your virtual machines are the different use cases that you're satisfying. So we see cloud come in very handy for DR. So you'll have your Scale VDI deployment, for example, deployed on-prem, and then maybe what you want is a DR site that's hosted up in one of the public clouds. So if you lose access to your on-prem, you can redirect users to the cloud. The cloud's also great for bursting capabilities or for the GPU intensive workloads, because those are expensive machines, but you can kind of rent them by the hour up in the cloud. So again, the key is probably what you want to think about is how do you do both on-prem and in the cloud based on what works best for that particular user and that particular use case. And then, of course, tout for Leostream because we can manage all of it from that single pane of glass.
Excellent.
Yeah, that was
Alan?
actually one of the big attraction points to working with your team, Karen, over at Leostream, is the fact that you guys take a very, not to get too Tolkien here, but one ring to rule them all approach, regardless of where those workloads need to run. Now, in my opinion, on-premise networks where you own and control your own data, own and control your environments, that's the preferred place to start. But that doesn't exclude by any stretch of the imagination leveraging all the resources available.
Great point. And maybe this is a good question for Eric and Ernest. I mean, I'm curious, why did you guys choose to run this on premises versus in the cloud?
So a big piece that comes along with us is the fact that as a healthcare industry, we're very big about and cautious with our data. We choose on-prem for us because we feel as though that we have the best control over it. It doesn't matter what occurs, what happens. We know that it's in-house and it's not going to go anywhere. So, but that doesn't mean that obviously cloud isn't a usable piece. It definitely is. But at least for our sake, we're very cautious when it comes to where we put our data and where it goes.
Great point. Yeah, great point, especially with healthcare data. All right, excellent. Let's move on. Question number 3 here. So why is it helpful to pair VDI and HCI? Alan?
So HCI and cloud both started to rise at the same time as 2 separate answers to the complexity problem. You know, the inverted pyramid of doom problem, as I like to call it, which was legacy virtual infrastructure. The servers plus switches plus SAN plus hypervisor plus management and DR componentry from a multiplicity of vendors. HCI, depending of course on which HCI vendor you're talking about, brings that same ease of use capability stack, that if you'll pardon the term fire and forget capability stack, to infrastructure while keeping you in ownership of your own data rather than just renting time slices off somebody else's computer. Now, there's places for both, but when you absolutely make local on-premise infrastructure easy to use, easy to consume, and cost-effective, that lends itself directly to being a fantastic platform for VDI to run on top of. Now, historically, one of the biggest challenges with VDI, in addition to all of the cost and licensing and pieces parts from different vendors, was the simple fact that it was just complex to manage all these different layers. Well, when you pair VDI and HCI, hyperconverged infrastructure, most of the complexity simply evaporates. When you pair it with companies like Scale and Leostream that have done the hard engineering work to make very complex tasks very simple to execute, you wind up with something that you almost don't have to think about. It just works, and does so at a fraction of the cost of legacy approaches to VDI.
Yeah, you didn't
And if
go
I could
through your...
add to...
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to add one piece to that, which is the ease of scaling the system out as well, because you know, it's much easier to just add another node to your scale cluster as your organization grows, and you can scale up your VDI system that way. So I think that's a key point too, is just the ability to scale up the system as you move forward.
We've experienced that.
You know, you're raising.
We've
Oh yeah, yeah.
As service lines have increased from our facility over the last 2 years, we've added a node and been up and running in no time flat.
You know, that raises an interesting point for me, is a properly executed HCI architecture running underneath your VDI implementation allows for the mixing and matching of very disparate hardware. You might have started 3 or 4 years ago with nodes based on processors and RAM footprints and speeds that were current and common at the time, and added as you've grown, but not been boat anchored to the point in time of your original acquisition from a technology perspective. add the latest, greatest silver, gold class processors and latest, greatest RAM footprints to your existing infrastructure supporting your VDI workloads without having to do a lift and shift of anything or create new silos. Very Lego bricks meets data center.
Yeah, I like that analogy. Lego bricks meets data center. And I know, Alan, one of the things you've traditionally gone through in the past on some of our events is tracing the path of an IO in comparing that to a traditional SAN versus HCI. To me, that's always been very enlightening as to the incredible efficiency, of HCI. So.
Yeah, when you get the Russian nesting dolls of object files sitting on file systems, sitting on object files, sitting on file systems out of the way, and just put bits where they go, it's amazing what you can accomplish from an efficiency perspective.
It really is. All right. Well, let's move on to our next question here, and that is it possible to do DR for VDI? And I'll first, I guess, hand that to you, Karen.
Okay. Yeah, sure. We kind of talked about this a little bit earlier, saying how the cloud's a great solution for DR. Obviously, we've had customers who have replicated on-prem environments on an offsite location and use that for DR. VDI is great for that because you can spin up capacity when you're in a DR event, and you can tear it back down and reuse that compute for other resources when you're not in any sort of DR event. And then the key is to ensure user access without any kind of disruption. And that's where the connection broker piece of VDI really helps you, because it always acts as that portal that the user goes to. And they probably don't even know, if you've done your DR correctly, that they've failed over to a DR site. All they know is that they log in and they get access to the resources that they need to get their job done.
Excellent. Alan, do you want to contribute to that?
I would extend on that because, I personally use VDI on scale powered by Leostream in my day-to-day job. Matter of fact, this webinar I'm joining you from is exactly based on that. When it comes to DR, we built a lot of that componentry directly into HC3. And we've also built out the relationships with cloud providers, kind of like what we do with Google and GCP with our Cloud Unity product. I natively replicate, just using Scale's built-in replication, my connection broker, my golden master images, even my gateway, up to instances running on GCP. And should my clusters drop offline for whatever reason, click clone start, right back up. Faster than users connected to it really know anything changed.
I like it. Eric and Ernest, anything to add on DR around your VDI infrastructure?
So we have looked at it. We have gone through the processor implementation ideas of it. So we've set up a DR site. We haven't actually put the infrastructure in place yet, but we've actually got one that's in one of our clinical basements. And we've essentially just started the process of going forward. But yeah, we've walked through it quite a bit of times, and we're actually looking at the process right now.
Yeah, so we have the fiber run in place to a facility that's a few miles away. But I think, we've been running this for a few years now, and I think that speaks towards the resiliency and how well these products work together, that things have been running just solid for our users with what we have on site right now.
And if I could add so we talk about DR, and we've been talking about data centers going down, or what we think of as DR events, but with the climate that we've been in lately, really what you have is business continuity, and you need to put business continuity rules in place so that when an event occurs, that's not necessarily what you might think of as a disaster event. My data center is still running. I just need to move my users somewhere and make sure that they have access. And that's really a strength of VDI, because it doesn't matter where your users log in from, you can get them access back to your VDI environment. And then you have to think about DR. What if I need to move that VDI environment somewhere else? But a real key for VDI is that it really does give you a good way to build a solid business continuity plan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think back to the same thing that she's saying. I talked about this about a month ago when we first started, getting remote users up and going. I had somebody come back to me that same day. We had them up and working remotely from their own house, and they said they were just overjoyed to be able to see the same desktop inside their house. So they said, the same thing I see at work is the same thing I see at home. And they said, that's just amazing to me that I can go to a URL, type it in, put in my username and password, and it's there for me.
Absolutely, and that's
that's actually a fun point. By implementing this joint solution the way we have, using Leostream's HTML5 access method and protocol implementation, folks are able, without having to implement or expand VPN, without having to image anything to send to folks, access their existing workflows from anything that's got a browser and internet access anywhere securely. That's a matter of minutes. Makes the endpoint irrelevant and simultaneously vastly reduces the exposure footprint of exposing those pristine corporate networks with all of your data and security processes in place to the least secure networks on the planet, namely home networks.
Well said. Good points all around. Thank you. So let's move on to question number 5 here, and that is what security features are available for your VDI solutions, and how do they compare, for example, to CITRIX and other solutions? Karen, why don't you start with that?
Sure. So some of it is what Alan just mentioned with the Leostream gateway and the HTML5 viewer that it has, which allows you to have users log in from the browser and keep your network data center resources kind of isolated from the outside world. The thing that we've seen get a lot of use since people have been sending their workforce home is the multi-factor authentication that we support. Obviously, you're in the office and people are logging in with their domain credentials to get access to their desktops or the file servers or what have you. But now you send people home and you get a little bit twitchier about letting people have access. And so what they've done is they've enabled, the second factor, be that or one-time time-based token, or maybe dual push notifications, SAML. There's a number of different multi-factor authentication methods that Leostream supports. And then also we have this concept of locations. So you can define locations and say, well, my users, when they're home or wherever they happen to be, not in my office, they have to go through multi-factor authentication. But that same user, someday when we all return to our offices, they go back to just username and password authentication because now they're actually inside of my network. And that all happens seamlessly once you set up the rules in Leostream. So you can manage how your users authenticate and the number of layers they have to go to based on where they are.
That's interesting. That concept.
One beautiful part about...
Go ahead, Alan.
I was going to say one of the really truly beautiful things about Leostream implemented this way is it doesn't self-limit to just VDI instances. The Leostream agent enables pulling server workloads, etc., into that same connection broker management interface so that you can consolidate your access methodologies out in the world, not just to people's desktops, but to their entire infrastructure. That's something that my customers have specifically found to be incredibly useful in this kind of work from home, work remote world that we all find ourselves in.
Nice. So we covered DR, we covered cloud, we covered security. Let's dig a little bit deeper here into exactly how these solutions work and the architecture. So we've got some really nice diagrams. Karen, do you want to walk us through these?
Sure. So obviously the HC3 architecture and all the goodness about how it works, I'll have to defer to Alan with that. But from a VDI perspective, the Leostream platform has these 4 components that you kind of see depicted here. Over on the right, the connection broker, it's essentially the brains of the operation. It's where you're going to define the pools and your policies, determine when does Leostream spin up new VMs, when should we tear them down, who do we allow access to. It talks to your authentication servers, your MFA providers, things like that. It also speaks to the Leostream agent, which is this component Alan mentioned. The Leostream agent, it's a service for Windows. There's also a Java version that can run on Linux or on Mac. So essentially, whatever you have in your data center, if your users go remote and you need to give them access to it, install the agent on it, and our broker can manage the connection to that machine. And then the agent sends information to the broker to let the broker know, when did the user log in, when did they log out, did they go idle. And so this gives you really good, not just tracking over who's using what from where for how long, but it also allows you to act upon those events. So maybe if someone's gone idle for too long, you want to forcefully log them out and break that connection that they have from their remote desktop. The other two pieces on the Leostream architecture, the main one kind of just outside the HC3 box is the Leostream gateway. So it is the piece that provides the remote access. So if your users are internal, if they're all in the data center, then it's optional. You don't necessarily need it unless you want the HTML5 component, which it includes, but it also includes the remote access tunnel. So it can provide the tunnel so users can log into your Leostream environment, and then ultimately you see the line on the bottom, connect the users through to their desktop. And that does support, we've talked a lot about the HTML5 viewer, but the Leostream gateway can also tunnel connections from what we call client-based protocols. So RDP, if you're just launching MSTSC, but also some of these higher performance protocols that I've talked about, like Mac9 TGX, for example, is one of them. And then the last piece of, obviously, is where the users log in from. Web browsers work great, particularly if you want to use the HTML5 viewer. For these client-based protocols, we do have what we call Leostream Connect. It's our software client. If you don't want to use a web browser, you want to give them the experience of, open up a little dialog app that you can type your username and password in. That's the last piece that we have, which is Leostream Connect. So that's over on your users' devices. But from a Leostream perspective, that's the architecture.
Okay. Alan, did you want to add to that?
That's the elegant simplicity that Leostream brings to the table meshes so very well with the architectural simplicity of HC3. Without doing a hour-long dissertation on how all of the moving pieces parts for HC3 work, we've done recorded demonstrations and had that discussion for the audience before, and I'm sure folks can find those on your site, David. What scale computing is really all about at the end of the day is autonomous HCI that doesn't require the consumer of it to be a VCP and a CCNE and a SNIA certified storage engineer. But your average Windows admin can have this thing up, going, running in, 20 minutes, give or take, without needing any real specialized training whatsoever. Still hanging on to all of the table stakes in the space, all of the feature sets that you expect to be there. They're just there, but you don't have to think about them. The autonomous nature of scale, our state machine implementations, etc., make the workloads sitting on your HC3 cluster, be it connection brokers, golden master images, VDI instances, server workloads, etc., things you just don't have to think about from a runtime perspective. Now, when you marry those two things together, you wind up with something that, well, quite frankly, becomes almost VDI in a box that can still manage legacy VDI infrastructures. So you don't have to leap all at once, but gives you a flexibility that you just don't find elsewhere in the VDI space. For years, as you said when you opened this up, David, the analysts, the pundit crowd kept saying it's going to be the year of VDI. But what it never was before now, well, the year of VDI. It was too complex. It was too expensive. It was too hard to manage. It was too hard to consume. And there was no cost savings unless you were 10,000 seats or above. Well, guess what? This joint solution from Scale and Leostream answers all of those checkboxes in spades.
I like that, and I hooked onto the word elegant right there. I really like any solution that describes itself and it is elegant. So that's very cool to hear. And we're going to get into exactly how to administer this. I'm excited to hear from Eric and Ernest, especially on that. And we've got screenshots of what it's like to administer it. Before we get there, just a few more questions. And this one is, can it coexist with legacy VDI?
Want me to take that one?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Alan, actually, it's funny, this slide came up next because he had just kind of led into it with the last thing he was talking about. And yes, that's one of the key things, is that particularly when you use Leostream, we do support various different virtualization layers. So you can continue leveraging those while you transition over to a scale environment. And again, your users won't really know, because they're going to use this one login portal, and one day they'll be logging into your old legacy VDI environment, and the next day they're going to go to their brand shiny new one, and from them it's seamless point of view. So that's the key. Leostream, we like to say, we want to future-proof your environment. We want you to be able to transition to these new technologies, change the protocols that you use so you can get better performance, but never have to swap out the connection management layer that you're using.
Excellent. I like that. Flexibility. What about remote management? Karen, can you manage these VDI brokers remotely?
The brokers themselves, yeah. So the broker, all the management of the broker is done from a configuration standpoint, is done through a web browser. So, and I mentioned kind of briefly on a architecture slide how the gateway can be used to tunnel the login traffic to the broker. Well, that can be login both for your end user and for your broker, your Leostream administrator. So now your Leostream admin goes home and they need to tweak the contents of a pool or change a policy, they can very easily still log into the connection broker itself and manage it that way as well. And then from the infrastructure point of view, I'll have to defer to Alan for that one.
Alan, what about
Sure.
remote management?
So remote management, yeah, since day one, HC3 has always been managed via SSL and HTML5. Manage your entire infrastructure stack from anywhere that's got a browser and a route. The Leostream approach to management and control plane fits perfectly with that same model that we've implemented internally. I'd like to add one last point to the previous slide about legacy VDI. That was another huge attraction point for us here at Scale to working directly with the Leostream team. Is VDI is kind of a big catch-all term these days, encompassing everything from terminal-based stuff and RDSH to application streaming to discrete individual virtual machines, desktops, both persistent and non-persistent. The thing that I personally really like about Leostream running on Scale is all of those different pieces, all those different flavors of VDI. They're just different center types in the Leostream broker. You literally can add any of them and it just works. I wasn't kidding when I said at the outset of this, the one ring. It's very much that.
Not the first time we've heard that.
This is true. The truth just keeps repeating itself on that one.
It is one of my favorite quotes.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Let's talk about cost savings. Can this help my company save money? Was one of the questions that was asked by one person who registered, or multiple people actually, on the landing page. And then how do we know the CapEx versus the OpEx for this type of solution? In fact, Adam just put in a question here out in the audience. He said, we're coming up on a node hardware refresh. Any tips on deciding whether to CapEx a large investment for another 4 to 5 years versus transition to an OpEx model? Alan, do you want to start with that?
That is such a site-by-site specific question. It really is. But let me tackle it a slightly different way. When we set out to create HC3, one of the things that we wanted to eliminate, and did, was all of the licensing feature functionality pieces that you find in virtual infrastructures that really inflates your CapEx numbers. We wanted to make virtualization, whether for end user computing, server virtualization, etc., it doesn't matter, come at a functional level that made it approachable by anybody, but at a price point that wasn't, 1,600+% over the cost of the gear it ran on. When you're talking CapEx versus OpEx, again, it's highly use case specific, but the truth of the matter is for what it costs to implement an HC3 cluster, for what it costs to implement Leostream licensing, which, by the way, clocks in at half the cost or less in some cases of some of the legacy providers. That's not that ongoing expense that you're renting out every month from somebody else. And for less than you're going to spend on an OpEx basis over the next several years, significantly less, I might add, you wind up with an infrastructure that you control, that isn't subject to the vagaries of some guy at large cloud provider X forgetting to update an SSL cert and dropping connectivity for your entire workforce everywhere. You own it. You control it. You have the ability to do that for a costing perspective that is apples to mangoes when compared to legacy VDI approaches.
I like that. Karen?
Yeah, the interesting thing it's as with anything, I guess, costs can kind of creep up on you. It's the unexpected ways that these, like Alan mentioned, licensing fees, and I mentioned it earlier, where Leostream installs on Linux, not Windows, where a lot of the legacy VDI vendors, they install their management tools on Windows. So and it's a Windows Server license. That's not a cheap license. So now with Leostream, you install on Linux, and now as I need to scale my environment and build more brokers and more gateways, I'm not suddenly needing more Windows licensing fees or paying more licensing fees in order to do that. So yeah, things like that you need to think about because they will kind of sneak up on you. Then the other thing about the cloud, and I kind of mentioned this earlier, there's use cases where it's great to be able to burst into the cloud. Again, if you suddenly have a seasonal workforce and you just need to get them something to work with for 3 months, or I have some HPC load that I need to run on a GPU-enabled instance, but again, just for a month. The cloud is great for bursting into that. And the thing about Leostream is our goal is to make it so that you can minimize your OpEx costs when you do need to go that route. So we will power on machines when they're needed, power them off when they're done, terminate them, because the key with the cloud is you pay for that compute. And again, it's those costs that sneak up on you. You don't want that compute running when you don't need it. And so the key, if you're thinking about cloud for anything, is to make sure that you manage that compute and where that OpEx comes in from.
Okay. Ernest and Eric, anything to add about cost savings or CapEx versus OpEx, either one?
I think the piece that comes back to us is we, for each side that's trying to make this decision right there, we were there with you 2 years ago. We understand, the heart of this question. We really were running ROIs against, number one, what we were traditionally doing. We had 550 separate individual machines inside of our facility, along with 300 laptops that we had 2 techs at the time trying to support. So in an OpEx standpoint, we couldn't keep up with the actual infrastructure to support it. In terms of a CapEx solution, we wanted to find something that would, number one, improve, so we weren't spending as much, but as well as we also understood that the 2 operations in the game, the big ones, Citrix and VMware, just like Alan had alluded to, they weren't viable. They didn't match. The price that came along with them just didn't hit. And so we had done enough searching and looking around. We'd found scale, and luckily Leostream had become a part of it. And through this implementation, we found that, number one, our OpEx actually decreased tremendously due to this implementation. Again, that's for us. Behind us being able to change out desktops very quickly and getting people up and going with, all we do to support is remote into a thin client, really. The other side from that, as well as is, in terms of a CapEx expense, we didn't spend, the buku bucks that you would with Citrix and VMware when we did this solution. It was manageable for us. We're a critical access hospital, and with a town of 10,000 people, this was affordable for us to do and stand up and make as a efficient and working product.
I love to hear that. Real stories from real companies out there. Thank you for sharing that. I know that can be very impactful for a lot of companies out there who are trying to make the same type of decision. Let's see, a few more questions here before we jump into what it's like to implement or administer it. Let's talk about the deployment. What's it like to get up and running Eric and Ernest, with the Scale and Leostream solution?
So I came onto this project. I've been here for 2 years, so I came in with this job when the decisions have been made for purchasing and things like that. I have over 10 years of experience in IT healthcare, so I brought that knowledge into this, and I tell you what, the deployment was just incredibly easy once we found the solution of Scale and Leostream. Um, once we had those pieces in place, we built a pool, we built a master template, and we were up and running, and just deploy that template out. It's just super easy. And then we got some thin clients, started swapping out PCs that were on the desks with thin clients at that user's desk, and transfer their files off that PC into their user shares, or into their profile that they have for VDI. And we were doing an entire wings of this facility in a matter of 1 or 2 nights. 100 users or more.
Very impressive.
Yeah.
Alan, anything to add to that?
Over the past 2 years of implementing this joint solution, 2 and change years, I guess, we found that it is just plain simple. Whether it's somebody just wanting to take Leostream for a trial, maybe in their incumbent VMware-based environment, or wanting to implement Leostream and VDI on their existing Scale cluster or a net new one, they discovered that it literally is no more complex if you're not using the pre-built appliances we supply. It's no more complex than standing up a CentOS 7 VM, logging into it as root, and running a single curl command. That single curl command reaches out, grabs the broker, downloads it, pipes it to the shell, installs everything, and bang, point a browser at it, you're up. Tell it about your AD. Tell it about your Scale cluster that you're going to run it on. That's going to be home to the virtual machines themselves. It automatically goes through and inventories that Scale cluster. Heck, Karen's team went the extra mile and coded native support into the broker for our entire API stack. Think machine creation services done the right way. It inventories everything there, discovers what golden master images are, and makes them available within seconds. It's just simple and straightforward. The gateway's the same story. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I see the biggest challenges with this have not been with Scale and Leostream. The most time-consuming things that really take our time are things like building a image that is specific to a certain department where they use applications. Image management takes more of our time than Scale or Leostream, because that stuff was so simple and quick.
Yeah, that's really saying something, especially for a hospital like you guys.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to roll out everywhere from patient rooms to nursing stations to the folks in accounting and do it boom, boom, boom. That's what makes a difference.
Yep.
Karen, anything to share on the deployment or implementation?
No, I think they've summed everything up really well. I will give kudos to our support teams, because anytime questions do come in, a lot of times it's configuration questions, not necessarily, hey, this isn't working, how do I set this up? It's, I want to do this particular workflow. I know the option's in here somewhere, where do I find it?
I guess I'll speak back to the same thing she was saying, is just the fact of that. In terms of support for Scale and Leostream, I've always given a big shout out to both teams from our side as an end user perspective, because Scale had, was very adamant about saying, hey, we've got some top tier support here. And we said, okay, well, we'll see as soon as we start going through. I don't think I've had a more personal touch when it came with Scale and their ability to be where we needed, when we need them, and how we needed them for the stuff that we had for implementation, as well as with Karen's crew. I can't tell you how many times we would get a ticket in, we'd have somebody on the phone with, you know, an hour, if not shorter, most of the time. And they were responsive. They were always willing to work with us and do a great job. So always appreciate those two teams.
I love to hear that. All right, let's get on to the next question, and that is, why is this a good alternative to CITRIX? In fact, we had a question come in from Carlos out there in the audience asking about how this compares to CITRIX as well. So Ernest and Eric, I know that you guys were considering CITRIX as well. You want to share a little bit of your story there?
Yeah, we had a CITRIX platform that existed here. It was sitting on a 2008 R2 base. We had known that obviously we could possibly just go ahead and upgrade it. We had a lot of thin clients with terminal services at the time, and we had gone back and looked at, say, okay, we want to re-engineer this. We want to figure out a solution for us that'll work. We reached out to CITRIX at the time. We said, hey, our current contract was not supported due to we had stopped paying for support in early 2010, back when a lot of hospitals had started hurting at that point for money. We said, hey, we know that we haven't had support in that time. What do we need to do? And Citrix came back and told us, hey, you need to spend $60,000 in re-upping your support contracts, and then we'll talk to you. And so from that point, we said, this isn't affordable for us. And really, somebody who doesn't want to hear what we're trying to do and help us towards a solution, we knew it wasn't going to be the right partnership for us. So I feel, truthfully, we've managed a lot more towards the fact of we're in a lot better place than where we were with the old Citrix solution, because just like we've talked about, multiple times, the simplicity. I manage, or Eric and I probably manage to go through Scale and Leostream maybe for 5 minutes a day, and it's just a check. We might do a few clicks here and there throughout the day. We're really not doing anything with the infrastructure throughout the day. It's pretty much just set it and forget it. And then if something comes up, it's really easy to access and use. So I didn't find that with the previous Citrix implementation. I found more than not, I was trying to get it rearranged the best way I could to hopefully make the end user be able to see what they need. And I'm not sure I ever really got them to a place that they were actually happy.
Yeah, as an, also speaking towards an alternative to Citrix and the past slides that showed the architecture, the user experience is basically the same. You have a login application, you type your username and password in, and you're at a desktop. So as far as an alternative goes from a user's perspective, it doesn't really get any more simple than that. It's the same type of thing that people are used to with Citrix.
Excellent. Do you want to add any more to this on how Leostream compares to other solutions out there?
Yeah, so the key about Leostream, and I should have given you this picture too. When you think in terms of VDI, there's this stack of components that you need. And Citrix and these other legacy VDI vendors, they roll in that stack. Leostream pulled a slice out of that stack, and it's the connection management and the remote access part. And that allows you to pick the best of breed solutions for the other parts of the stack, such as scale computing. If you look just at the Citrix piece of the stack that relates to our piece of the stack, feature by feature, there's parity. We call things by different names, but if you need to build pools, you need persistent versus non-persistent. We are essentially, it used to be called the desktop studio. I'm not certain what it's called now in the Citrix stack, but that's the piece our connection broker is the desktop studio. And so if you're worried about feature parity from a connection brokering standpoint, well, then you just shouldn't be, because it's pretty standard what you need to have in a VDI broker these days. But then the nice thing about Leostream is, again, it allows you to build the rest of the stack based on what works best for you.
Nice. Well, let's jump into what it's like to actually administer this solution. So Eric and Ernest, let's chat about that. We've got a few screenshots from your actual environment here that you were nice enough to share with the audience.
Yep.
Tell us what we're looking at.
So currently right now you're looking at a console look at our Scale nodes. So right up there at the top, you can see obviously the lovely logo of Scale. and then the version that we're running, and obviously we're needing to do an update, as you can see. From that, you also get nice little displays for CPU, disk, network latency, I/O, and memory. And so each one of those square boxes underneath go for RAM and disk space, and each one of those squares is one of our nodes that we have currently in play. And I believe we have 8 at this time. So underneath that is, of course, all the VMs that we have going on. So we currently have, I think, 340 VMs running on that piece, and I think somewhere around 320 of them are inside Leostream as actual machines that we jump back and forth between for VDI. So, and
you know, you'll see underneath where all those VMs are, the applications that support this VDI infrastructure, like a print server, you know, that's also running on there as well. So not only are the virtual desktops on there, but for the users, but the servers that are virtualized to support this are also on there as well.
Yeah. So of course, like our broker and our gateway still sit upon that scale nodes as well. So they're currently running on there. And then if you want to go to the next slide, Scale has a really nifty way, which is they call it template, is their tag that they use. And so underneath that, that's actually what gives the tag to send back over to Leostream. And underneath that, that gives us all of our golden images for our pools. So what you're seeing there is essentially the golden images we built for each specific pool that we have at this time, because we have such different applications for different areas for our building. So we actually try to keep our images as clean as possible. So we, you know, our VDI Basic has just very small amounts of applications on it, and then it kind of scales up from there for each image.
Okay.
And then yeah, and on this slide, this is where our pools are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we also tie those back to our templates, and then with those pool configurations, depending on how many users are on each image, you know, we define the parameters of how big we want the pool to be. We also have some test pools. So, you know, Patch Tuesday comes out from Microsoft. We update our master image. You know, build a few desktops out in the test pool, make sure everything's still working correctly, and then you know, change the settings and re-provision all the desktops into our main pools, because at our facility we're using non-persistent desktops with our users using FS Logics from Microsoft for their user profiles.
I think a big thing that goes back to that Windows Update piece that he was talking about is just thinking about, I mean, we started to try to use SCCM in-house, and the amount of complication that existed from that, trying to get all the machines to update, making sure everything was turned on, getting all those pieces to go. When Leostream and Scale, when all we have to do now is we go into 12 images, we update them, we turn them off, we come back into here, we say re-provision, and then they're all updated. We've essentially taken an entire workforce's set of machines and we're updated in the same day that the patches came out.
Yeah, it's much simpler.
And then here you'll see, this is our assignments tab. So a big thing that, just as Alan was talking about with that AD integration, this goes through and you can actually set by group or member of that you put inside that user's profile. That assignment then will go through and select a policy for that specific pool. So essentially, we try to make it as simple as possible. Of you give the group name, matches the policy name matches the pool name, and then they all tie back, you know, to their original endpoint location. And then that way, we know exactly where a user is going to go to, whatever, you know, their assignment is. That's where they need. And if they need to be moved on the fly, they get moved on the fly. We've had people go from one image to another, and it takes us 5 seconds of just changing an AD group.
Yeah, that's the nice thing with the AD integration. You like you said, move them from one group to the other, and then all of a sudden they have a different desktop with the, you know, with the user profile out on the network share. All their files are exactly where they expected them to be. Nothing changed with that. And with the AD group changed, all of a sudden, you know, like I said, they have the different applications they need for moving from one pool to another if they move departments or job title changes, things like that.
So on the next slide, you'll see the users tab that goes through there. That's just our current users. And so you can have a completely listed display of essentially any users that you have going on at that time. You can have the clients that are going on the side, the IP addresses, all the stuff that you would need to make a connection or make any identification. The big thing that was with us, whenever we need to remote in, we have our thin clients just go by serial name for our Dell Weiss, and we literally type in the thin client serial name, it goes and does a VNC into the thin client, and we're seeing exactly what the user's seeing. So we have a very easy platform for remoting in and making sure troubleshooting what's going on with our end users. And that you see our basic login screen. So this is all our customer or our endpoint users essentially ever see. They're really just sitting there. They sit at a thin client. They get a username, password prompt. We built a nice little login instructions for them. And then they see a Windows 10 thing, say their name, and they're right in. I mean, this was huge for us in terms of our implementation, because we went from an environment that had generic users with a password that was 4 characters long, that was lowercase, inside of our entire environment. We changed out from that to this 2 years ago. And so our risk score went from extremely high and is now dropped to very low. And it's just through that implementation that's helped us that much more.
Well, this is really cool. I love seeing what it's like to really administer it visually here. We can see how easy it is. Thank you so much for sharing those with us and with the audience. Karen and Alan, anything to add on administration?
You know, it's hard to one up, so to speak, guys that live it every day.
Right.
But the simple fact of the matter is the platform's incredibly flexible. I'm sitting here literally using Leostream on scale to my own VDI VM persistent with multiple monitors, different resolutions. It's a non-issue. It's something I don't have to think about. I could be using one of my thin clients. When I step out, I'm using an old Lenovo laptop running the Leostream Connect piece and running in shell mode. I power it on. It comes up to a Leostream prompt. I type in my domain credentials. Bang, I'm in. Doesn't really matter. It's just that simple.
Yeah, we have many users that use laptops in our facilities, and with Leostream, with the shell mode, to them it looks like they're just logging into a standard Windows 10 laptop. And then, then at that point they are using remote desktop to a VDI session. But the user doesn't have to even know anything different than what looks like logging into a standard Windows 10 laptop.
You know, one of my favorite quotes from one of my other customers was when they chose to go from testing, proof of concept, etc., to production. They chose to have the first person they rolled that out to be the person who complains to IT the most. Because they figured if they could get that person happy, everybody else would love it. Well, they rolled that out to that one person at the city and waited a week and said, so what do you think? And the only thing that person said, who, bear in mind, was the constant complainer in the group, said, oh yeah, it's fine. That's high praise from that particular person. It tells you that end user experience is just seamless and easy.
Absolutely. Well, I know we're running out of time here. We've reached the top of the hour. Alan, I know you answered a couple questions from the audience right there. Mike and Dawn were asking if you support multiple monitors, and the answer obviously is yes.
Do you want me to take that one, Alan?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Assuming
I'm sitting here looking at multiple monitors right now.
Yeah. Yeah, the key with the multiple monitors is it's a function of, can you hear me? Am I on?
Yes.
Is this thing on?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine.
Okay. I'm totally paranoid now. The key with the multiple monitor support is it's a function of the display protocol that you're using. So RDP supports multiple monitors. There, you're going to get that when you use Scale VDI. The HTML5 client, well, that opens in your browser, so that's single monitor. If you span your browser across 2 monitors, it's not going to know where the bevel is. It's not going to act well. But that's just a function of the display protocol. So yes, emphatically, the answer is yes.
Okay. Carlos was asking if you can provide access to applications alone instead of an entire desktop. Karen,
that
you
again
wanna take
is
that?
a function of the display protocol. Yeah.
Yes.
So, Mhm.
Well, individual
Yep.
applications. Let's roll that. Let's talk about that real quick. Earlier on, I mentioned Leostream being kind of a one ring. Adding a center that's say an RDSH server that's just doing application streaming, that's just another connection. That's just another center in Leostream's world, and being able to stand up that RDSH server as a VM on a scale cluster, map that as a center in Leostream, and publish the individual applications, connect the users via the broker to the applications the RDSH server is publishing. That's not hard. What
Awesome.
the broker really does at the end of the day is connect authenticated users to resources. And those resources,
Eric and Ernest?
in any of their various flavors, can live on scale.
Nice. Well, before we go, I want to announce the winner of the Amazon $300 gift card. That is Dana Briggs from Tennessee. Congratulations, Dana Briggs of Tennessee. Eric and Ernest and Horizon Health, I want to thank you and your team for sharing your story with us today. Thank you for being on, Eric and Ernest, both of you.
Of course, thank you.
Thanks for having us.
And we've got so many more questions that we'll have to get back to after the event because we've just run out of time. So many good questions, so many good topics, a lot to talk about here. Alan and Karen both, thank you for being on the event today.
Thank you so much. It's been our pleasure.
Glad to spend time with you.
And thank you to Scale and Leostream, of course, for supporting today's event. Before you go, don't forget to check out the handouts and the links that are available in the handouts tab, and visit scale.com and leostream.com for more information. Thank you to the audience, of course, for joining us on today's event, and we'll see you next time. Have a great day.
All right. Take care.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.